Even something as simple, not simple, it's a big thing, but like having the BRCA gene. So many women are like, I have the BRCA gene. This is just what it is. And now I have to test regularly. But doctors aren't saying, let's figure out why that gene may be expressing. It's the lifestyle.
Your crazy schedule with your kids and work, like that's not going to go away. But if we can biohack or bioharmonize to increase that resilience, it's just going to help us to manage all of that better. And HRV is really the number that's telling us how resilient are we.
This is where the hack comes in. This is where we use a tool to align with our body's natural biology and rhythm. This, in my mind, my goal for this time together is, I think we're living in like a really cool time, especially for us women. I think so many women who have perhaps in the past been told like symptoms that they've experienced, whether it's things like brain fog or hormonal shifts or just not feeling like themselves. If these women have been told they've just got to live with it, I think now we all know that that is not the case. And we're going to dive deep into that today. At least a couple of us here in this room have a personal story of something like that and how biohacking has helped us. I mean, it's essentially taking our health into our own hands. And then I also definitely want to touch on some really powerful, really easy to use in any moment of our lives tools that can help the woman, whether she's in like the car line, driving her kids around, navigating a toddler meltdown. We've got like the big, powerful biohacking tools that we all love, like the sauna, the cold plunge, the hyperbaric chamber. Love them. And then, we can talk about some things like circadian rhythm or mindset shifts or, my passion, like these 5-minute tools that are actually really easy to implement in a busy woman's life.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Great.
We will do
Love
that.
all that. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right, guys. So give me a bit of background. You guys have been living in this space. Actually, let me back up for a minute. Let's define for anyone listening to this. I've got a lot of new followers who maybe don't even know completely what is this term biohacking so that they can be fully engaged through this whole conversation. Because this is a really important starting point for any woman who maybe doesn't love how she's feeling, knows that she can feel differently. This is a really powerful tool and way of life that they can dip into. So what does it mean when people are talking about biohacking now? It's like hitting the tipping point, hitting mainstream. Everybody's talking about it. What is biohacking?
Yeah, I think we could define this differently on any given day, but just to simplify, it's anything that you choose to engage in your daily life that will optimize your health potential. So using the genes that you were born with, environment, lifestyle, habits, behaviors, control how our genes express. So we have agency over that. And a lot of men in the space have kind of taken over this term. And so there's some varying opinions or perspectives about the actual word biohacking. It's really just like a disruption in maybe what our flow is or what's not working, just to reconnect to our intuition, optimize, and be the greatest expression of ourselves.
Love that. Renee, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I love that you said it's a way of living. Like it really should be a lifestyle. This is not a quick fix solution. And whether you want to call it biohacking or health optimization, any of the things, as long as you are tapping into what your body needs as a bio individual and being willing to experiment a little bit. So a little bit of the biohacking is bringing in the tech, not just the tech like, even hyperbaric or cold plunge sauna, things like that, but using the tech to say, is this working for me? So collecting that data to say, is this the right thing for me to be doing? Because we can't do all the biohacks. Like no one has time to do all the biohacks, nor would I want you to spend your entire day doing that. So it's like testing it. Does it work? Does it not? If it does, well, how do we fit that into our daily routine so we can be consistent with it? And if it doesn't work, being okay letting go and saying it's just not what my body needs right now.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that's really important for us to touch on too is, we now know that epigenetics has such an influence on our gene expression. So, what does that mean? It means our environment's role on, we could be carrying like the breast cancer gene, for instance, but it's the environment that's going to determine whether that gene turns on or off. And I think a lot of, what we see as biohacking is really controlling/influencing the environment that we're in, right? So whether that's like cleaning out the toxic products in our home or instead of being under artificial lights all day at work, incorporating some red light or being conscious of getting out in the sunlight. So this is really huge. I think for a while this was like, sitting on the edge of experimental, right? And like now we know through science, this stuff is working. And that's why we're seeing it everywhere. People are starting to see it everywhere. I know we've all been in this for a while, and especially you guys. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about how you grew up because I think a lot of us who've been in the biohacking field have been in it since maybe the early 2000s. And you guys really, excuse me, and you guys really grew up in this space starting in like the 80s. So talk to me a little bit about your dad and your house growing up and how that influenced perhaps you guys really stepping into jumping full on into this field.
Yeah, our dad was like the coolest and the weirdest guy. He had
Yeah.
all the strange things in our living room. He was using low level laser therapy, which we now know as PPM or red light therapy. And we were like playing with these things as a kid. We didn't quite understand what they were doing to optimize. But what we did learn is a way of curiosity. Our dad was very curious. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He was always thinking outside of the box in terms of conventional medicine. And so we learned very early on, if we could always ask why and keep digging, but also like keep zooming out to look at the big picture, we can actually put together solutions and puzzle pieces and find answers for us, which are all going to be very different. So I think like the biggest thing we learned is just a curiosity mindset, which we carry through to our practice now.
Yeah. I just to add that, the open-mindedness was huge because so our dad also he is a biological dentist, and that started in 1985 by actually. Can I share a quick story about how he got into this? Because I think this does set the stage. In 1985, his best friend was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And he was only given a few months to live. They said, we can't treat the cancer at this point. And he, from Maryland, flew out to California to go to an alternative clinic. And when he got there, they said, open your mouth. All of that metal has to come out before we can treat your cancer. He flies back, says to my dad, who's a general dentist, traditional dentist at the time. And my dad's like, what does that have to do with anything? What? It's silver, mercury, amalgam fillings. What's the problem? But being open-minded at the time, he said, maybe I should look into this. And now we know so many years later how toxic those fillings were and are. And that completely flipped his entire practice upside down. He was like, I need to do things differently. I need to think about my patient's health in a different way. And so that really set the stage again of just never shutting an idea out. If there's something there, maybe look into it.
Mm-hmm. And addressing the whole
his friend
system,
is still alive.
right?
His friend is still alive today.
Wow. Still alive.
Almost 40 years later, he's alive and doing great, thriving.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But whether it be like conventional dentistry or anything in the conventional model, there's so much isolation. Like we kind of put blinders on and just look at one system, but all the systems are connected. And I think that's what we've been missing for so long. And perhaps what biohacking could offer us, it doesn't always go that way because we can get really addicted and fixated on these little fixes. But if we keep zooming out and looking and seeing like everything is connected. So when a woman has a hormonal issue or has anxiety or has brain fog, it's all part of the same system. So we really can simplify and just support the foundations to make these things work better.
Yeah, I love too your guy. I've heard you on other podcasts talking about like getting curious. And I think that's such an important word for the listeners. Like get curious and always stay curious about your body, right? Like I come from the chiropractic training where it's like the joke of like, we can either see the check engine light come on and put a sticker over it and forget about it, or we can get curious and lean in and be like, what is my body trying to tell me? And here's where I think women in I like to call it the bioharmonizing space, right? Because we're not hacking anything. That's such a masculine word. Like we are harmonizing. And I know you guys feel the same, but us women, we're naturally very intuitive. And so I think bioharmonizing gives us this incredible opportunity for any woman listening who maybe hasn't played in this space yet. It gives us the opportunity to say, what is it that my body's telling me? And, maybe start to ask continuous, like deeper questions, like, what is it that I'm perhaps not giving my body that it needs? Or what is it that my body's getting too much of that isn't serving it? And we can start to like peel back the layers. And, I've heard you talk about this too, Lauren, on your Instagram. It's really about, getting rid of all the interference, all the stress in our bucket, right? The bucket analogy, I think a lot of us talk about. whether it's toxicity or things in our life that aren't serving us, like removing those layers and essentially getting back to the core of who we are, because our bodies naturally thrive and heal. And so, I want to talk a little bit about like, getting curious. And I think here's a place for like wearable tech for someone who's just starting to get into this field. It's like where you start to get to know your body's rhythms and what's working and what's not. Right. But I do want to start with Renee. I think I've heard you share a bit of your story of, your health journey and how biohacking and some of these tools helped you. And I want to share that so any woman listening who maybe has had or experienced some of these symptoms or some other ones can really start to open her lens to these other tools that can really make a huge impact outside of conventional medical system, where we're simply treating the symptom, right? Or again, like I can't tell you guys, I don't know how often you hear this, but women being told like, this is just how it is. Like you're just middle-aged and these are your hormones. Or, I mean, when I was super sick with neurological Lyme, this doctor told me to go home and rest. I was a tired mom. There was nothing wrong with me. And like, we have got to get back to listening to ourselves and speaking out for ourselves. Like there is something not right. I'm not going to live the rest of my life with this. And we don't have to, right? I think that's why we all love this stuff, because we realize you can feel even better as you age if you're listening.
Yes. Even something as simple, not simple, it's a big thing, but like having the BRCA gene. So many women are like, I have the BRCA gene. This is just what it is. And now I have to test regularly. But doctors aren't saying, let's figure out why that gene may be expressing. It's the lifestyle. It's such a simple question. You don't have to just be like, that's my sentence. That's what my life is going to be. It's not true.
Right. We don't have to look at our bodies from like a victim mindset, which is, I think, part of the traditional medical system. It's like, oh, my bad knee. Or, oh, my bad back, or, oh, cancer runs in my family. Literally every single one of my relatives have passed away from cancer. And that's why I do this. Like, I'm not just going to sit here and wait for that diagnosis. We can change our genes through changing our environment.
Yeah. I think just with the genetic piece, I do recommend everyone gets their genetics tested. I think it is great information, although it's only a small piece of the pie. But I think it helps you to narrow in on what you need to be focusing on. So like for you, maybe what do you have anti-cancer protocol things you need to be doing? Like Lauren and I have the Alzheimer's gene. So we need to be focused a little bit more on, cutting back on alcohol, sugar, focusing on deep sleep. We're just kind of prioritizing a little bit because we know that is there, but it's not the end all be all. So I think it just helps you narrow in on what you need. And yeah, circling a little bit back to my story. So when I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, my traditional doctor said, your labs are normal. You just need to sleep more. Similar to you, go home and rest. I was like, sleep more? Like I am sleeping a ton and that doesn't seem to be working. So, and that's where the curiosity came in. And I started working with different practitioners and putting the puzzle pieces together. And people always want to know, what was the one thing you did? It wasn't that simple. I had to really look at everything and put it all together to figure out what my body needed and still needs. It's always evolving. Evolving.
That's the tricky part. Our bodies are dynamic. It's never one thing. There's always things in the bucket, as you mentioned before, but like our bodies are designed to heal. So if we can start taking things out of the bucket, but like the work doesn't end, which is like the good thing and the bad thing, right? Like this is a journey. It's a lifestyle. It has to be a lifestyle. We can't just do a protocol and go back to our old ways. We have to adopt supportive practices. And a lot of that is just leaning back into more ancestral ways of living, getting in touch with nature and cleaning up our air and our water. There's so many simple things you can do that don't involve a lot of tech and a lot of protocols. That stuff is great, but we got to do the basics first.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to start by talking about some of the tech. And then I do love, I think a lot of us have used the tech, especially at the beginning of our bioharmonizing lifestyle, because it's a really cool way to get to hear your inner voice and your intuition. And it's, when your doctor told you get better sleep, there's a whole slew of information around our sleep, right? And so you can start to measure that and figure out, okay, these things help me get deep sleep. These things kill my sleep. Like, I think those metrics are really important at the beginning, because whatever we're measuring, we're going to start to influence. Right? Whatever we're looking at, we're going to be working on. So I'm 100% with you guys. And I think, ideally we're getting to a place where we're simply listening to our bodies. we're getting out in nature. I mean, so much of bioharmonizing is just putting our body back in the environment that it was designed to thrive in. And so most of these tools at the end of the day, and I think we're going to see the pendulum finally swing more this way in the bioharmonizing field, is sunlight and getting out and playing like a kid and having time off of our screens and all these things that are accessible to everybody. But I want to, at the beginning, really speak to the mom or the woman who's maybe left a doctor's office that told her, this is what it is. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned genetic testing. If there's, maybe a handful of tests that you recommend are the best ones for women. And, I think with all these things, it's like, pick your one that you're curious about. Ask questions. They can put it in the comments. They can email either one of us. But pick one. Like, don't let this be yet another thing that's super overwhelming in all of your to-dos. But let's name maybe a few of the most important tests based on, like, our women around, like, maybe age 30 to 60.
I would probably start with just like a functional lab test, but make sure you have the right practitioner to look at it, because we're still working off of conventional ranges, but there's so many puzzle pieces that we can gain from looking at that, from digestion to hydration to HPA axis, like adrenal and cortisol, inflammation. We can just start working on the basics: sleep, hydration, digestion, glucose, just from that, but we're not looking at it through the right lens. So get the markers, but get someone that can do a deeper discovery. And I would say, Renee always says, like, get one tracker. Maybe it's the Oura Ring. Maybe it's something that just look at HRV biofeedback. Just getting sleep data and that heart rate variability, which is such a great metric for overall resilience, is a great place for women just to be like, okay, that makes sense. I am feeling that way. It could be a little confirmation, or maybe it's like something you totally don't feel and it's revealing a blind spot, and then you can look a little further. And Renee loves to talk about HRV. I feel like you want to jump in.
Oh, sure. It's my favorite thing to track, because I think we can learn so much about how all of our lifestyle factors are impacting our overall health and resilience. And I think resilience is the key, especially for moms, right? Like, your crazy schedule with your kids and work, like, that's not going to go away. But if we can biohack or bioharmonize to increase that resilience, it's just going to help us to manage all of that better. And HRV is really the number that's telling us how resilient are we. And so, like, yeah, Lauren said, I like the Oura Ring just because it's easy to wear. It gives you a lot of data. I think it's easy to interpret. So if you're just starting off, I would invest in an Oura Ring. But with HRV, so for me, what was really interesting is when I was experiencing burnout, chronic fatigue, something really eye-opening happened. Our dad had found this thing called the light portal. And there happened to be one in Tampa, Florida, where I was living. There's only 7 in the country. And I'm like, it's down the street. How wild is that? The universe is bringing this to me. So I'm like, sure, I'll go try it. I'll try anything. I lay in this thing for an hour, and it's using kind of, oddly enough, looks like a coffin. We kind of joke it looks like a coffin, but it's a specific type of wood to help with the resonance of the vibration therapy, color therapy, binaural beats. There's crystals in there, and it puts your body into a parasympathetic state pretty much immediately. I got out after that hour, and I'm like, I feel like a new person. I can think clearly. I feel creative. I've never thought I was a creative type. I'm having all these like wild ideas. I'm like, what is this? And I realized I had never really experienced being in a parasympathetic state. I was like addicted to the stress, go, go, go. How many hours can I work? Can I go to school full time? Can I do all the things? Putting my body into that state, I was like, wow, this is really rejuvenating and healing. And so over the years, I figured out, how do we bring that into our daily routine? Because I know moms aren't going to go lay in something for an hour, right? And we can maybe get into some of the simple 5-minute strategies, but tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system is going to increase that resilience. It's going to make us feel better, more energized, more mentally clear. And yeah, so there's so much to unpack with HRV, but I think everyone should be tracking it.
Yeah. So just to zoom out, HRV, for anyone who doesn't know, heart rate variability is essentially, when your body has a reaction to a stressful incident, how quickly does your body regulate, right? And so that's, like Renee was saying, that's our resiliency, because we all have stress. I mean, thank God we have stress. It means we have jobs, we have loved ones, we've got a life that we're juggling, all blessings. but how can we change how we're responding and reacting to these stressful situations in our life? That's what we can change. That's what we can influence. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I'm a huge fan of the Aura Ring for tracking HRV. I think I've learned so much about myself. So I would love to know, when you guys started tracking HRV, what were some things that you started to experience? How did you learn about like these daily ways to get into your parasympathetics? Because I think so many of us live, without even realizing it, addicted to stress, right? Like those moments where there's nothing going on and you've got like a little bit of space. I think I catch myself subconsciously being like, what am I missing? What am I supposed to be doing? What can I create to fill this space, right? And that's that addiction to stress.
Yeah.
So how can
grab
we
your phone? Yeah.
Totally. So how can we learn more about HRV? Like, what did you guys discover when you first started looking at it?
My big takeaway, which is just so weird, I feel crazy to say this, but I just realized I wasn't resting, period. I lived in New York City. I was working 10 jobs. We were taught that like more was better and that you didn't have to recover from exercise, which I now know from my genetics, which is a small piece of the puzzle, it takes me longer to recover. So that was really affecting me. Maybe it doesn't affect everyone, but it was affecting me. And when I started just spacing out my workouts, but also just finding little periods of downtime and down regulation. I think this is a big product of us living in a very masculine framework world, right? Everything is very linear. It's yes or no. It's forward moving. We're women. We are the creative space, the flow in between the structure. But we're living in this masculine framework where we feel like we have to constantly do. And it's more of that down regulation, more of the working in. The working in is what builds up our energy reserves. And so you can actually get a lot more shit done if you have the little periods. And so the other piece of the genetics was learning for me that I'm more of an interval based person. I don't do well with endurance. So I have to take rest. And if I take those little periods of rest, even if it's just 5 minutes up from my computer, walk outside in the sunshine, I come back and I'm like, wow, I'm like really, I feel different. I'm recharged. And my HRV like slowly started to climb just in taking those teeny little breaks that felt hard. They felt bad. I felt guilty for doing it. But then you get the feedback that like it's actually your body's responding to that and it compounds because your body it starts feeding back what you want if you listen to it.
Yeah, which I think, you touched on something so important there because I think so many women know that they need these breaks, but then they judge themselves, right? I've definitely found myself doing this, like, but I'll just push through and I'll just get it done and then I'll relax later. But what I just heard you saying there is, seeing this objective data helps kind of create an accountability partner. Like, I know that I need that. And when I get that, I'm better, right? I think we constantly push it off. Like, I'll do it later. I'll rest Friday. I'll rest this weekend. I think most women, we need these dips into our parasympathetics.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, what genetic test did you do that helped you learn that about yourself?
Gosh, we've done so many, but I think that, what is Kashif's
DNA company?
DNA company was actually probably the most valuable in terms of insights. I learned a lot about how I clear BDNF really quickly. So that's why you don't have to tell me to work out. I love working out because it gives me a natural high. I learned that about my recovery. Yeah, there's some gems in there that I didn't find in other genetic reports.
It's a really good test. Okay, one more question for you, Lauren, on that. So as you saw your heart rate variability going up, which is a good thing, we want it to go up. What did you notice in your life? So like wipe away all the objective data. Like how you feel change? What was different?
More tolerant, more patient. When I don't rest, I'm a very impatient person. Very impatient. There's just like more space to be able to deal with anything, any challenge. And I talk to clients about this all the time. We're going to have stressors in our life. You said we're living a life and these are blessings, but like it's a real thing. Just this morning talking to a client, he has stuff that goes wrong, like his trucks are getting into accidents and that is a thing he has to deal. And he's like, my glucose is going up when that happens. I'm like, yes, but you can't control that, but we can always control how we react to a situation. And that's a practice, right? It's like going to the gym and strengthening that muscle of how do we work on the reactivity, the responsiveness? But I felt like I had more space to control my reactions because of that heart rate variability going up.
Which is something that can be seen as so subtle, but you think about how that literally influences every relationship that you have.
Everything.
Everything. And that's, just to highlight this, because I think this is one of the most important concepts for any woman listening to take home. What you're talking about there, Lauren, that you did, I mean, that takes how many minutes? Your mini breaks.
1 minute makes a difference, really. 10 minutes is really great, but 1 minute feels good.
And it's literally stepping away from what you're doing, call it your computer, your whatever your task is, ideally getting in nature, figuring out something it is that you love, and doing that and connecting with yourself again for a moment. It's free. It takes minutes, and you're a completely different person on the other side of it. Like, that is so beautiful because everyone has access to that. And men. This is for the men too, let's be honest.
Yeah. We love the free stuff. We love the free
stuff. Yeah. All right, Renee, what did you learn about your HRV when you started tracking it, your heart rate variability?
Probably the biggest one, which maybe wasn't a surprise, was the impact of alcohol. I think every biohacker would agree they can see alcohol dip HRV. And with some of the trending of like, oh, wine time, I need it to wind down, mommy juice, things like that. If for the women that maybe are still consuming alcohol, I would really look at that. Because that's just hands down going to just tank your HRV. And you probably feel it the next day. You're a little more irritable. You didn't sleep as well. And it just kind of rolls off from there. So that was confirmation more than like a big surprise, I would say. And then also for HRV, incorporating breath work. So that can be totally free, right? Like you said, just 1 minute, close your eyes and do some box breathing. Like that's completely free. And then to add in some tech, I would say doing HRV biofeedback is a really cool tool because now we're actually training the nervous system. So maybe just like a minute closing your eyes and breathing. Yeah, you're tapping into that parasympathetic, you're down regulating. A little bit of training, but if we can do HRV biofeedback where you're using some kind of tool like Elite HRV or Optimal HRV where you're measuring your HRV in the moment and then you actually test for your resonance breathing. So this is where the personalization comes in. So the breath work that I need to do for my HRV is different than what both of you need. So doing this, it's a 16-minute test on the app. You only have to do it one time. You don't have to repeat it. And then your resonance breathing. And it's very specific. Like mine is inhale, I think, for 5.2 seconds, exhale for 7.8 seconds. It's so granular. Wow. And then you can do the training with the app. There's different ones that are really cool. Even like Moonbird does a little bit. It's not as personal, but I like Optimal HRV because you can close your eyes and it chimes when you need to inhale and it chimes when you need to exhale. And even just 5 minutes, you are training your nervous system to be more resilient. And over time, I've seen my HRV improve. So I think that's a really cool thing in just a couple minutes a day. Yes, you do need to invest in a heart rate monitor. Super cheap. Maybe you already have one. And then download the app.
So the app is called Optimal HRV?
Optimal HRV. That's the one I've been using, yeah.
I'm going to do that one. Yeah. I'm someone who, I know breath work is so good for us. I do not like it. And I think part of it, honestly, is I need to change the word in my mind to breath play. I'm like, listen, I'm already working. I need to, like my escapes, I need to be playful. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. I don't know if you guys do Enneagrams.
Nice.
I'm not super familiar. I know of it, but I don't know what a 7 is.
Like my personality type is very much inner child play. Like my 5-minute breaks are like skateboarding or gymnastics or handstands. So when I hear the word breath work, I'm like, I'm so turned off by it, but I do it.
Sure.
But I love the idea of knowing. I love the idea of knowing like this is exactly what I need to do for the breath play.
Yeah. It's like it's kind of like an HRV gym. Think of it, or exercise. Yeah. Just like you go to the gym, you lift weights to strengthen your muscles. This is using breath work to strengthen your nervous system. And you only need a couple minutes.
Got it. Love it. Okay, I'm going to check that one out.
Yeah.
So I'll add just a tiny thing on HRV here. I have my Oura Ring on. I don't tend to wear it on the daily anymore, but I just was with my son in Park City. And, I do like bringing my wearables when I travel because this is where you start to see like what is happening when I change time zones. I tend to get hit pretty hard in the altitude. So I was doing everything I could to see how I could influence it. So we land in Park City. I mean, within 12 hours, my HRV tanked to an 18, which is very low. So I had packed methylene blue. We were getting in the sun. Like, it's just where you can start to, I don't know, I almost feel like, do you guys feel this way? As you're getting to know your body, it's like, I feel like crap. And it's affirming to look and be like, well, yeah, it's reflecting here. And then it's really affirming to try some things and then watch it climb as you feel better. It's like showing you objectively what's going on the inside instead of, I'm going to keep going back to this, instead of these outside people in our lives, whether it's doctors or loving family members being like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's, I think, trackables like this show you those gray areas where maybe it's not black and white. You're not showing up on a traditional lab because they test for like extreme disease. This is more of a functional measure of like, you're not sick, but you're not great. You're right here. And so let's see how we can play and move the needle a little bit.
Yeah, I love how much you use play. But I do think the optimal goal is to reconnect to intuition, right? This is an objective metric that helps us to subjectively start to put together these clues. And then it's like, oh, right, I do feel that. You become more sensitive to that. And I think long term, I know I don't want to be attached to trackers. I've been wearing my Oura ring for almost 7 years. I wear a lot of CGMs, but like ultimately, I want my body to be the metric. Absolutely. But because we live in this framework where there's opinions and everyone has a different, there's like just so much noise. This is the way back in.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think it's, ideally we don't need this stuff because we're so tuned into that inner voice, but I think we've second guessed it. We're so used to putting all the power outside of us, whether it's people telling us how we are and who we are, or it's also like these outside tools that are going to make us better. So, I want to now start to talk about, speaking of putting the power back in, like we've talked a little bit about breath work. What are some of your guys' other favorite 5-minute tools that perhaps are either more of an inside out approach, like reconnecting with ourselves, or, maybe it's circadian rhythm, cycle syncing, like some of these tools that come from within rather than outside.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Renee.
Circadian rhythm, since you mentioned that is kind of coming from within, right? We have this internal clock, and Lauren and I talk a lot about social jet lag. So I like the term because I think a lot of people can relate to jet lag, right? You've flown across many time zones and then you struggle to either fall asleep or wake up the next day and you feel a little foggy, not quite your A game. And so we experience social jet lag quite often. And this is the week of daylight saving time. How many people listening woke up Monday morning and they're like, oh man, this is rough, right? That is a little bit of social jet lag. So if you stay out too late on a Saturday night, you sleep in Sunday morning, you're thinking, oh, I'm sleeping in, I'm catching up on my sleep. But actually your circadian rhythm doesn't want you to do that. So really training this. And I actually find that my mom clients do a little bit better because of kids. Yeah. Kids, I don't have kids, so I can't speak to it personally, but you as a mom, I'm sure getting your kids on a routine is so important. And I know this week is really hard because your kids are like, oh, it's light out. Why do I have to go to bed? So keeping them on a schedule is so important for their health as kids, but that's setting them up for success later in life too. So getting that clock trained earlier on is better. But for parents, following that. So putting your kids to bed at whatever time, and then you have a bedtime. Don't say, oh, now is my time to catch up on emails and watch Netflix or whatever. You want to stay on that clock. So, I guess there's a lot to unpack with circadian rhythm, but I think using light is a really great free biohack. So when you wake up within 30 minutes, going outside, if you can get your feet on the earth, that's a bonus because you're getting the grounding, the earthing from nature. You're getting fresh air. You're getting the sunshine in your eyes, no sunglasses. That's saying, hey, time to wake up. And that's amazing what it can do to set up your day and even improve your sleep. So I would say sleep optimization starts when you wake up.
Yeah, I want to talk about the sunglasses thing for a minute because I think this is really important. So you said no sunglasses. Let's talk about why that is. This is so crucial. Ladies, listen up.
Light is a nutrient. Light is the cue that enters our retinas and tells our brain what time it is. So if you block that cue, your body's going to get a little disorganized and chaotic, and that disrupts the rhythm. Your body wants to know what time it is based on what you tell it through cues from the environment. And so I know wearing sunglasses is fashionable, and maybe there's a time to do it. Like the red light glasses actually are becoming kind of cool at nighttime, which I think they got, somehow it's trending for the wrong reasons, but it's going to work. It's working. Like if you want to wear the glasses, wear them at nighttime, but daytime is your time to get that cue. Because if you are in rhythm, if your circadian rhythm is in routine and flow, everything trickles down from there and works better. Our body wants to be synced.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to stay on this topic for a minute. And this is where the word hacks really does come in. And this is really applicable. So talking about social jet lag, I love, and I think you guys have a cheat sheet for this, right? We'll link it in the description.
Yeah, we need a book.
So if you Google biohackers and you look at images, you're probably going to see a lot of people with these funky like red and orange colored lenses on. And why is that, right? The reason that is exactly what Renee was just talking about, this term social jet lag. So say you hear all this and you're like, that's great. However, Friday nights or Saturday nights, I'm going to go out on the town. I'm going to have a little fun. This is where the hack comes in. This is where we use a tool to align with our body's natural biology and rhythm. So if the sun goes down, but you are out at a wedding, a bar, whatever it is, hopefully you're not drinking a ton because that's not going to feel so good and you could see it on your Oura ring.
Yeah.
This is where those glasses come in because it will start to block some of that bright, bright white light and it'll tell your brain, it's not noon, it's 8 p.m. And so when you do go to lay down at night after that nighttime party scene, you will have been making melatonin and you'll sleep easier, right? So when all of us gather and we travel at all these conferences, we're in hotels, the lights are blaring and there's parties, but we have those glasses on so that we can maximize our sleep on the road, right? And so here is a place for a hack, a tool, because life happens, right? And we're social creatures and there's going to be opportunities to be with our friends. And I think that's a really important part of longevity is connection and community. But here's how we align with our body's natural rhythm, right? So we'll link some great red light lenses below. These are also great if you're traveling, like red eye flights. I always use these. If you're, in an environment where you can't control the lighting, I think we probably all have red lighting in our home after the sun goes down.
Everywhere. Yeah. It's really sexy.
It's funny.
You look weird to your neighbors, but it's cool, I promise.
I have a neighbor across the street where one of their bedrooms, now I see red lights at night. I'm like, oh, there's a biohacker in my neighborhood. I'm assuming that's what it is. I don't know.
You influence them. I mean, speaking to the moms, so our oldest one is 14, and like I'm constantly hearing our friends battle with bedtime. I mean, our home, right now it's, at 7 p.m. So what month are we in? We're in March. It'll probably be April by the time this comes out. But at 7 p.m., like our home turns to red light. And so our kids are ready to crawl into bed. I mean, we're all going to bed by like 9 p.m., no fights. It makes a huge difference because if you're sitting under blaring white lights, the cue to tell our brain what time it is through our eyeballs. So if we're seeing light, our brain thinks it's daytime.
Yeah. Right. It tells you raise your cortisol, find food, be productive. Yeah, that simple cue is a game changer.
And again, this goes back to like our bodies are brilliant. This doesn't mean something's wrong with us. Why can't I sleep, right? Why can't I sleep? Well, because we're not putting in our body in the environment that's conducive to sleeping.
Right.
We're
if you want to stay up all night, just put the TV on and scroll on your phone. You probably could stay up very, very late.
Right. Because our body's brilliant. It would think it's daytime. And so what does our body do in daytime? It does daytime functions. Yeah. So, I think I'm like oversimplifying, but just I think this is really important for anyone who's maybe new to this space because our body is powerful. And I think that's one of the other really important take-home messages along with like getting curious, like, why can't I sleep at night? Let me look at my environment and let me see what I can hack and harmonize so that I can align with my body's natural ability to heal and thrive.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best times to be curious because that's like that is such a pain point for so many people. They can't sleep, whether it's you can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep. And you have to just get curious continually. And there are some band-aids that are maybe not necessarily bad. We can pull in maybe melatonin to reset, or we can use some sleep nutrients, but ultimately you got to zoom out and look at the behaviors, their circadian rhythms. We have to look at underlying stressors a lot of the times. I'm sure like we've all worked with mold and Lyme clients. It's like we can get everything in order, but if your body is burdened, that's the time it's going to disrupt. And so, yeah, it could be a long checklist, but getting the behaviors and the timing of your day really sets the tone for everything else to fall into place.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so now if we were to go down this checklist, we've talked a little bit about sleep and circadian rhythm. We've talked about, a bit of like lighting and getting out in the sun and nature. What would be other things on the checklist that you would recommend for your clients?
Moving your body, moving your body. And this is my play, and maybe it's not everyone's play, but because you mentioned play, there's so many different types of workouts, and I always empower clients to figure out what makes sense for them. What do they enjoy? Hopefully you're not doing exercise just because you got to do it. Like do something that actually feels good. I personally love mobility because it ends up being therapeutic, but it's also a diagnostic. I can play with kind of no rules and boundaries and figure out what does my body need? In a lot of ways, it's a bit of a meditation and a journaling experience because I get to take stock of like, where am I holding tension? Where is there pain or congestion? Is there an emotion tied to that feeling? So it's just sort of this open space where you get to talk to your body with like no set outcome. Like we can just play and be in that moment and listen. And then like you also get a workout because you're moving your body, you're activating your muscles. Hopefully we're getting some lymphatic flow, which we think everybody needs a little more lymphatic support these days. So that's definitely on the checklist. Move your body a little bit more, whether that's classical exercise or like crawl on the floor. Just crawl on the floor, like twist, lay supine, roll over, push, pull, just like look at a baby. Look at how a baby or an infant moves and just start to kind of mimic that. We've gotten away from that because we're all sitting in chairs, right? We're sitting in chairs, we're going to the gym, running on the treadmill. We're not really playing much.
Yeah, everything's very linear.
Yeah,
our movements,
very
right?
linear.
Yeah.
Very linear.
So I love this concept. I talk a lot to my women about, having this conversation with ourselves, right? Whether it's like, what are thoughts in the morning? This is where we start to reveal our addiction to stress, right? What are those first subconscious questions we're asking when we wake up? It's often like, where am I behind? What am I missing? Right? These conversations with ourselves become really powerful. And so I want to go back to what you were just talking about, Lauren, with mobility, kind of walk us through, like, what does that mean to you? And you were asking, it sounds like you're asking yourself, is there an emotion tied to this feeling in my body? So tell me a little bit more about that so that people can do the same.
So we are a system of systems, and your organs are connected to your musculoskeletal system, which is connected to your energetic system and connected to emotions. And so let's just take, for example, if I have low back pain, which I personally have struggled a lot with. I was a dancer and I've had injuries, so I've actually had trauma to my physical structures. But I also know that a lot of times my pain is flared up because maybe I am not detoxing well. If I've traveled and been exposed to a lot of oxidative stress and air pollution, I might get a flare up. If I'm experiencing some stress, emotional stress over the relationship or work, I may get a flare up. So it's interesting that it's not just the physical trauma, but that an emotion can be tied to that. So this is part of the internal conversation that we have to have because we're so quick to like blame one thing, right? I got to go to the chiropractor, which is extremely valuable. We need someone to look at our physical structures, but like, what if there's something else that needs to be addressed? Is there an unresolved trauma, or is there something that you needed to express but didn't? So your body's holding on to that and it's giving you pain in your back. So, there's a lot wrapped up into that, but just like sitting in a squat and going like, body, talk to me. What do you need to tell me? If you're quiet long enough, it's going to tell you.
Yes. Again, getting curious, right? Getting curious and having that conversation. I will tell you as a chiropractor, when people came in, I mean, I worked with a lot of moms and babies, so I didn't get a ton of like the low back kind of injury stuff. I worked with a lot of empowered moms having these conversations with their bodies, right? Which I loved, and their kids were learning the same. But, if someone came in and threw out their back, pretty much 9 times out of 10, it was not doing something that would have warranted that kind of response. So I would always ask them to get curious. And I'm like, what were you thinking about at the time that this happened? Right? Where were your thoughts? Because we all know, I mean, there's that book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a phenomenal book if people haven't read it. And then there's also emotions tied to, like Lauren said, different areas of our bodies. So the low back is about support, and the left side is females in your life or feminine energy, and the right is masculine. And so you can look at any structure in our body from a physical standpoint, or you can look at the emotional script that ties to that organ system or body structure. Another great book I'll link below. I'm blanking on the name now, but you can literally go into this book and look up like right shoulder. And it'll tell you, you know, shoulders are obligation. Like, where do you have a sense of obligation for something that maybe you're not into right now? And it's just so neat to explore, because every stress that accumulates has a physical component, but it also has a chemical, like you were saying, oxidative stress. And so much of it is emotional. And just creating an awareness can help shift us out of that and back into alignment. It's so powerful.
Yeah, just one quick
Yeah.
personal story. I had this shoulder pain that was nagging me for years and years and years. And I was like, I'm doing all the physical stuff, I'm doing the mobility, the PT. I was like, I checked all the boxes. I'm a big fan of plant medicines, and I actually do microdosing coaching. So I have a lot of experience. And of course, I've lived it because I have to live it to be able to help other people. But I did a plant medicine journey, and I spent some time with my shoulder. And what came up was some masculine, unresolved stuff. And I spent 5 hours laying down, forgiving past situations. That shoulder pain has been gone since that day. Gone. Wow. Gone.
I believe it. You know,
It's crazy.
It's wild.
It's not
Yeah.
crazy.
No.
plant medicine has a very incredible way of getting us out of our linear brain and tapping us into the areas that we don't normally use. I think to each their own. I've definitely had some similar experiences of clearing out generations of stuff that wasn't mine through experiences, and it's super powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so blessed for that opportunity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so
Opportunities.
glad to know that you support people through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I on that tangent, my biggest lesson with plant medicine has been stillness. So, I talked a little bit about my journey of opening up to parasympathetic regulation and downregulation, and I had many journeys where you are just sitting there, right? You're not working on your to-do list or planning anything in the future, and I was so uncomfortable. So, and I think a lot of people, like we said, they're uncomfortable with the stillness, with the silence, but plant medicine amplifies that. And so for me, it was just really eye-opening that, oh, this is something I need to work on. I'm really not comfortable with the quiet. So it's fascinating. Hard,
Yeah.
but fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think that is? Because I think you're definitely not alone in that. I mean, I think so many of us women, I don't think it's coincidence that business is the same word as busyness. It's so easy to say, you know, I'm just working, right? It's so easy. And I think the reality is a lot of the time it's a distraction out of sitting with ourselves. So
Yeah,
like why
yeah.
why do you think that is? What are we so afraid of?
For me, I think, well, there are two things that I've kind of unpacked with this. And one is I've always had a hard time saying no. I've always been a yes person. I've been a people pleaser my whole life. And so I think I used busyness as a way of getting out of things without saying no.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, oh,
Yeah.
can you meet me on Saturday for this? Rather than me having the guts to say, no, I don't want to go. That's not what my body needs. I would just say, oh, no, I'm working. Oh, I'm busy. An excuse
Yeah,
is easier than saying no.
It's a really easy boundary if we struggle with boundaries, because people will rarely question work. But if you're like, no, I'm just not feeling it, you could get guilted, you could get pushed, you could get questioned. And the reality is we want to be strong enough to be in a place where like, that's enough. Like I don't feel like it. And I think we're all working on getting there, a lot of us, right, together as women, because it's really powerful. And what starts to happen is you empower other women to do it too. And that's where I think you really start to find your like-minded community, because you start to find the women that are like, wow, you just said no because you didn't feel like it. And instead of like pushing against you, they're rallying with you. And you're like, you're my girls now, right? That's how if you've outgrown your circle, if you can't have your boundaries within them, your circle will find you when you start to stand up for it.
Our
Absolutely.
voices are so powerful. They're so needed. And think about how many women have thyroid issues, which is in the area of expression. And there's other reasons for that, right? Environmental stressors, underlying infections. But if we constantly are not practicing speaking our truth, the body is going to keep the score in this area of the body. So, yeah, just
100%.
speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love where this conversation has gone. I do want to start to wind down and wrap up because all of the women that are listening, I'm sure, have lots on their plates. But, I don't want to miss any final messages from you guys. I want to ask you, what is your favorite, from each of you, what is your favorite, like, lowest hanging fruit? I think we've covered a lot of it, but like, if there's a woman listening and she's like, all right, I want to do one super new, easy thing that I can implement anywhere, what do you think is like the easiest / most powerful? And then kind of any other resources and where my audience can find you guys.
I would say whatever this means to you, however it resonates, find some part of your day where you can get quiet. And if that is just standing in the sunshine and like literally not touching your phone or doing anything, or maybe it's taking pen to paper and having a chat with yourself, or maybe it's moving your body, you have to have some time where we're not consuming, because your body's not going to talk to you if you are pulling information in. So we have to stop consuming, stop that input, and then the body's going to get louder. And that's how we rebuild our intuition. And that's where all the answers are. So we don't have to go to Google, our friend, ask a million doctors, practitioners. Like, your body's going to tell you. And I promise it will tell you if you just give it enough time. So whatever that quiet time means to you, find it, make it work, make it feel good.
I love that. And I think too, the conversation piece bridges the gap, right? Because like Renee, you were saying, it's hard to just sit alone, or it's hard to sit in the nothingness at the beginning if you're not used to it. But if we create like this anchor tool of, okay, let's create a back and forth conversation. Maybe it's a journal. Maybe it's, we all talk to ourselves anyway, right? So like literally a back and forth conversation. And I think that's a really great gateway tool that you just mentioned. So it's, we're not telling someone just go sit in the nothingness and like somehow make it comfortable. Yeah. And I think we get to a place where it becomes familiar. And so it becomes comfortable, but it starts with that inner conversation. And how beautiful to get tapped back into such a great teacher and guide within yourself, because we do know all the answers, right? It's all here.
Yeah. Yeah. I would add to that, be aware of how often and wherever you're being influenced by what other people are doing, especially with social media. There's a great podcast called Influenced to Death. And I just think that says it all. Like, on social media, you're like, oh, that's their morning routine. That's what they're eating. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Be careful of trying to just replicate what someone else has figured out works for them. Maybe you experiment and try a little bit, but really always coming back to yourself and making sure you're doing what you need to do. And for me, when I first knew what the word biohacking was, with Dave Asprey and Bulletproof Coffee, all of this opening up, I kind of fell into that trap of like, oh yeah, fasting 16 hours a day, butter coffee, all of the things that the men were doing. And I was trying to replicate that. And it obviously didn't work out well for me. I burned out again. I had hormone dysfunction. And so, yeah, really coming back to like that feminine energy and intuition, all the things we've been talking about today, and just really listening to what your body needs and try to shut out the noise of all the people trying to influence you to death.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So important. Well, ladies, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to make sure we link all your stuff below, the social jet lag, which I love that concept. Cheat sheet. You've got a podcast. You've got an incredible newsletter. We'll link your website. Did I miss anything else? I just want to make sure.
Instagram.
Your Instagram.
Link to that. Yeah. Reach out to us there. We're really active. And yeah, we're excited to have you on our podcast. Very soon.
Yes. So we can keep chatting because this is so fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank
you.